Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. Now, my name is Rod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about how the global financial credit rating system is no longer exclusively a matter for the West. Now, I'm talking about the decision by the Chinese agency CCXI to assign a BBB+g credit rating to Russia, which is not merely a technical assessment, it's a symbol of a global turning point. Now, it's been evident for some time that Fitch, Standard & Poor's and Moody's, which have long dictated the rules of the credit rating game, lost their neutrality and became instruments of geopolitics and hostages to their so-called customers and US government pressure. Now, the US subprime mortgage bonds that were given AAA status by those agencies then turned out to be worthless, illustrate that point very, very well. So since the 2008, the decisions made by these organisations are becoming increasingly questionable, to the extent now even the US Treasury has issued a critique of the US sovereign rating agents' rating from Moody's. Now, Russia. What are the consequences of the big three withdrawing their ratings from Russia following the commencement of the special military operation in 2022? Now, notwithstanding the sanctions imposed on Russia, its economy has demonstrated serious resilience. So the Chinese rating agency is the first to give sovereign status of Russia by a non-Western analyst since 2022. The country's creditworthiness was assessed by the Chinese Shenzhen International Credit Rating Agency, which is CCXI. Now, the credit rating is BBB+g with a stable outlook, and that suggests that Russia is a reliable borrower and capable of fulfilling its debt obligations. No shit, Sherlock. Now, this creates opportunity for Russian companies and the Russian government to attract investment and expand access to Chinese and potentially international capital markets. Probably not just yet in the US and Europe. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, SCOBRICSinsight.com, and you can do this by making a small donation, which is done by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen. Everybody who makes a donation gets a personal thank you from me, and I'm thanking you now. Also, set the alert button so you get notified when I post a new video, and also keep the comments coming, as I love to read them and love to respond to them. And don't forget to share with all your friends. Now, the rating of this is particularly important since it reflects the view of the Russian economy from one of the world's leading financial rating players, says Dara Donets, who's head of credit and finance at the University of Economics in Russia. Now, on the one hand, the recent news regarding international finances has clearly exhibited an underlying political dimension. Conversely, evaluating the risk associated with Russia involves a thorough assessment of the potential returns on the financial instruments. Should the CCXI assessment indicate a reduction in the risk premium, this would likely signify an advance in stock index information and a harbinger of a reduction in interest rates, the analyst reasons. Now, the Chinese agency's decision is clearly linked to Beijing's strategic support for Moscow in the face of this so-called Western-imposed isolation. Yeah, we saw that on Victory Day, didn't we? Over 30 leaders. Now, particularly important in the context of mutually beneficial economic is worth looking. Because institutional investors and state banks of Chinese government require formal risk assessments in order to work with Russia because of their current domestic regulations. So the CCXI rating is perfectly suited to this purpose. Now, the agency's decision may, in the long term, simplify Russia's access to Chinese capital markets, further issue of loans, bonds and investment, including project financing and participation in initiatives such as One Belt, One Road, according to analysts. So the rating from the largest Chinese agency, which is also widely followed by investors all over Asia, is undoubtedly significant, as Vladimir Eremkik, who's a professor of structural research at the Russian Presidential Academy, confirms. Now, he asserts that the Chinese partners, this is a signal that doing business is a safe and worthwhile proposition. So this is a positive side for Russian companies, as it creates an opportunity to increase investment from Asia. In general, for Chinese businesses, it signifies that despite sanctions, Russia remains an attractive market with a high reliability status. Now, the global market has now been given a signal that Western ratings are not the be-all and end-all. In fact, we knew that already. Now, CCXI demonstrates that alternative assessments are a valuable option. I mean, the publication of Russia's assessment is a political message that Beijing is demonstrating its independence from EU and US institutions. I mean, the rating is based on purely economic assessments, which many Asian investors find useful when trying to identify attractive investment opportunities, according to The Economist. She said, "We are pleased to announce that we're offering new loans at competitive rates. The agency's positive assessment was influenced by the country's macro financial stability, its positive economic growth rates in recent years, and its successful policies to overcome the consequences of sanctions." Now, Alexander Abramov of the Analysis of Institution and Financial Markets at the Russian Presidential Academy emphasized that 30% of CCXI agency is actually owned by the international rating agency Moody's. So this provides Russia with an opportunity to apply for a placement of securities in countries where institutional investors recognize the Chinese ratings. I mean, it should be noted that the focus of the discussion pertains to countries within the BRICS, the Asian region, and probably the Middle East. I mean, in certain cases, such securities can be published by global hedge funds, which have greater flexibility in terms of circumventing sanctions, according to the analyst. Now, it's also important to note that in March 2022, the big three so-called credit rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's and Fitch, suspended their operations in Russia and withdrew all of their ratings. Now, it's obvious that their objective was to negatively impact the Russian economy by influencing the attraction of investment and determining the cost of borrowing. That said, it's widely acknowledged that the agencies were actually under significant political pressure to do so. So it's evident that actions were not driven by economic considerations, but by political motivations and pressure. So I would like to actually point out now that the head of the US Treasury, Scott Bessent, has recently criticised Moody's for a number of reasons. And that follows the agency's downgrade of the US's credit rating, with Mr. Bessent calling the appraiser a lagging indicator. I mean, it's possible that this is the case, but it does appear that there's an internal political background, and they're probably some Democrat voters as usual. Now, in relation to Russia, S&P, Moody's and Fitch have effectively restricted international investors from engaging with Russian assets because the rating, obviously, is a fundamental position. Now, the fact that their assessment of the country is now withdrawn because the nature of their views were from 3 years ago anyway, and unless they brought something new. Now, Aremkin highlights the significant transformation that are underway. The conclusion of the Western monopoly, to some extent the big three are beginning to lose their monopoly as they follow the political situation rather than the real economy. They don't look at the economic facts. I mean, as major investors begin to rotate their market activities towards alternative race agencies, the influence of S&P, Moody's and Fitch are going to decrease. I mean, in addition to those companies, there's a number of serious Asian agencies. I mean, among them are the Japan Credit Rating Agency, which is quite influential in the region, and it does seem to want to avoid political involvement in conflicts. I mean, Dagong Global is the state rating agency of China, and it also did cease to provide ratings from Russia due to the impact of sanctions. However, Russia's receipt of a sovereign rating of BBB+g with a stable outlook from CCXI provides an unambiguous indication that Russia is back. This is partly symbolic, partly factual statement, and a signal of the ongoing transformation of the global architecture of economic credit ratings. This has also discussed the gradual dismantling of the cartel of the Western rating agencies, whose assessments have become totally instruments of geopolitical pressure rather than impartial risk analysis, but we've known that for a while. Now, Abramov notes that in general the activities of the rating agencies have become more diversified. I mean, the big three that were once the dominant players in the field but are now facing serious competitors in the international arena. I mean, the Chinese rating agencies are a key consideration. I mean, the movement to establish precedents with ratings from other agencies and the potentially to gain access to Asian or Middle Eastern markets is a positive trend in itself, and it's possible that Russia will seek to develop these new markets according to the analyst. So it's evident that there's going to be an alternative financial architecture that's already taken place. I mean, for Beijing, Russia's CCXI credit rating is both a gesture of support for Moscow and a bid for imposing an independent rating system free from the dictates of the dollar. I mean, for Russia, it represents a valuable opportunity to attract Asian investment and stimulate the Russian economy. But significantly, it challenges the prevailing Western financial control model. Should major players such as China, India and other BRICS members, along with observers, begin to rely en masse on their own rating agencies or the ones in the Asia region, the dominance of S&P, Moody's and Fitch is going to collapse, thereby destroying the hegemony of Western ratings. We shall see. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Do set the alert button to get informed when I post a new video, and if you want to help out, click on the thanks button. See you all again soon. Thank you.